How's it going, everyone? So recently we've been diving into the upcoming 2023 draft, but in today's video, I want to go back and look at the 2022 draft and primarily the Green Bay Packers draft class. So today I wanted to give an initial grade on the Packers 2022 draft class after one season. And these are just initial grades after one season. Some of these players that the Packers drafted didn't play any snaps at all. So obviously what these players might turn into, we don't know yet, but we can still grade how they did after one season because now they've had 1 year under their belt in the NFL. I don't agree with grading draft classes right after the draft because they have yet to play any NFL snaps, so it's kind of like an incomplete grade at that point, but at least with this, they've played some, or at least most of these players have played some. Before we dive into the grades, I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about a recent fantasy sports app that I've been playing a bunch, Underdog Fantasy. Now, the cool thing about this site is there's no league management. There's no setting lineups or stressing over a year-long period of your fantasy draft. There's no waivers, there's no trades. Underdog Fantasy allows you to draft a dream team in minutes. Another really cool feature with Underdog Fantasy is they have a pick'em feature where you can win up to 20 times on your money in one night. You pick higher or lower on your favorite player's stats to win big, and you pick between 2 to 5 players. The more players you pick, the higher your winnings could be. And they actually have a really cool special going on for the Super Bowl this Sunday. There is no way to lose this pick'em entry. That special is a higher or lower on Jalen Hurts total yards at 0.5 yards. So obviously, Jalen Hurts is going to gain more than 0.5 yards. So you can simply do the max $20 limit on this entry here and get an easy win. So go sign up now on Underdog Fantasy using my code BASS. I'll leave that information all down in the description as well. And when signing up with my code, you will double your first deposit. They will match your first deposit anywhere from $10 all the way up to $100. So if you deposit $100, you will get another $100 in your account. And then you can also go in and do that pick'em entry with the easy Jalen Hurts win. Again, that's promo code BASS, B-A-S, and the link to that will be down in the description below. So the Packers' first pick in the 2022 draft at pick 22 was linebacker Quay Walker out of Georgia. So the thing about Quay Walker is he got a lot of playtime this year for being a rookie, thrown right into the mix, pretty much won the starting job over Chris Barnes pretty much instantly. But the one thing about Quay Walker is he was wildly inconsistent this year. Kind of what you expect with a rookie. He had his ups, he had his downs, and he definitely needs to figure out how to control his emotions a little bit better. If we bring up his PFF stats here, you'll see exactly what I mean. Some games, awful grades. We're in the 30s in some of these games, but some games he's in the 70s or the 60s, and even a game against LA, he had an 87. That was definitely his best game on the year. Quay Walker finished with 12 total pressures, 2 sacks, 2 hits, and he also had 87 total tackles. So in terms of tackles, he did really well. He had a 10.2 missed tackle percentage with 13 missed tackles, and he also kind of struggled in coverage last year, allowing 31 receptions for 304 yards, a 9.8 yard per reception. And if we compare him to all the other rookie linebackers in the NFL this year, he was actually 16th in overall PFF grade, but if you notice, he had more snaps than everyone above him. So he had 846 snaps. None of them got even half the snaps Quay Walker did, except for Malcolm Rodriguez in Detroit. And a lot of people said, oh, why didn't they draft Devin Lloyd? Devin Lloyd actually had a worse grade than Quay Walker this year. And a lot of other people will say, oh, they should have waited and drafted the other linebacker from Georgia, Nakobe Dean, on the Eagles. And you would say, okay, well, he did have a good grade at 78.6, but he only had 47 total snaps. So that's a very small sample size. Whereas Quay Walker, 846 snaps, instantly contributed to this defense. And honestly, I thought he flashed a lot. What they have in Quay Walker, I think, is something special. His rookie year was shaky, as I stated, inconsistent, but I do believe he will become a really good linebacker in this league. But just based on 2022, which is what these grades are, I'm going to give Quay Walker a B grade. But I do believe he will be better next year and the year after that and so on and so forth. The next draft pick was their other first round draft pick at pick 28, another Georgia defender, Devonte Wyatt, defensive lineman. And man, I feel like as the year went on, people kept saying, we need to see more of Devonte Wyatt. Every single time he got limited snaps, he looked very, very good. And as the year went on, we kept saying, okay, we need to see Devonte Wyatt over someone like Dean Lowry. Then when Dean Lowry went on IR, Devonte Wyatt started to get more snaps, and he had some really good games. As we see here on PFF, he had 3+ games with an 85+ PFF grade, and the one game he got the second most snaps in Week 18 against Detroit. He had his highest grade ever, a 90.6. Wyatt finished with 8 total pressures, 2 sacks, 9 tackles, and only 1 missed tackle. So although he only had 224 snaps, it wasn't that far off the snap count from Jordan Davis, the other defensive lineman selected in the first round, to the Eagles before him. And he was also 3rd in overall PFF grade for all rookie defensive linemen. I do believe they have something special in Devonte Wyatt, and I'm really excited to see year 2 of him next to Kenny Clark and TJ Slayton. I think they're building something really good on that front 7, something they haven't had in a long time. And as I said, although Devonte Wyatt's sample size was smaller than someone like Quay Walker, I thought given the opportunities he had, he played really well. So for that sake, I am giving Devonte Wyatt for 2022 a A-. The next pick, the Green Bay Packers traded into the top of the 2nd round and drafted wide receiver Christian Watson out of North Dakota State. Now, this was definitely the most exciting pick, and most of the offseason he had some injury concerns with his shin. I think he had surgery on that, and then earlier on in the year he also had some injury concerns, but we all know that turning point, middle of the season, this dude started to go off. It seemed like every single game, this guy was scoring multiple touchdowns. And I've said this time and time again, I do think Christian Watson will be an extremely good wide receiver in the NFL. What we saw from him this past year, just late in the season, I mean, man, the things Watson was doing to defenders in terms of, burning really good cornerbacks, an end around, just taking it 65 yards for a touchdown. The speed on this guy is just unmatched, and I think he's going to be a threat to all defenses for the future. As we see here, Watson finished with a 77.1 overall PFF grade. He had 41 receptions, 611 yards, and 7 touchdowns. And he was also utilized in the rushing game, like I said, with the jet touch passes and the end arounds. This guy, when they put the ball in his hands, he scored touchdowns. He had 7 carries for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns as well. And when you compare him with the other rookie wide receivers, sure, he didn't get as many yards. Garrett Wilson with 1,100 yards, Chris Olave with 1,000 yards, Drake London with 866, George Pickens with 801. Christian Watson only had that 611 yards. But when you compare the passing snaps with these guys, it's pretty crazy because he only had 282 total passing snaps, whereas other guys here had 400 plus, even, Garrett Wilson and George Pickens with 600 plus. But Christian Watson still scored way more than these guys with the 7 touchdowns, where everyone above him has 4. I'm just really intrigued with the explosiveness of Christian Watson, and even if it's Aaron Rodgers or Jordan Love at quarterback, I do believe he will eventually be the #1 wide receiver in this offense, maybe even as soon as this year. I think the Packers should still get a veteran #1 guy that they can trust on and open up Christian Watson a little bit more. But I do think in the future, Christian Watson will be a #1 wide receiver. And just based on his 2022 season, even though the first half was pretty much incomplete, I'm still going to give Christian Watson an A grade because when he was on the field, I mean, this dude just exploded. The next pick in the 3rd round, man, the dreaded Green Bay Packers 3rd round draft selection. At pick 92, they selected Rhyan, guard out of UCLA. And man, I know it's only been 1 season and this guy could turn into something good on the Packers offensive line, but I believe he's the only rookie offensive lineman in this entire draft to not get 1 offensive snap. Not to mention at the end of the year, after not even playing, got suspended for PEDs for the last 6 games. I was actually very excited when the Green Bay Packers selected Rhyan in the 3rd round, and I was like, okay, this could be the end of the Green Bay Packers 3rd round curse. If we remember, the last good player the Packers were to select in the 3rd round, if we go all the way back, was Morgan Burnett. There has been a lot of busts in the 3rd round, not to mention Amari Rodgers, who was drafted just a couple of years ago, already cut from the team. And man, it is not looking good for Rhyan. The start to his rookie season, not getting any snaps on offense or special teams. So just for the fact that he's a 3rd rounder, if this guy was a 7th rounder, I'd be like, all right, he didn't play. It's okay. I get it. But the fact is he was a 3rd rounder, didn't play at all. So for that sake, Rhyan's grade for 2022 is going to be a D-. And the reason it's not an F is I'm holding out a little bit of hope. And of course, this is just based on 2022, but there is still kind of a projection here. That's why I'm giving Christian Watson an A, Devonte Wyatt an A-, even though Devonte Wyatt didn't play too much. It's kind of what they're building on from the 2022 season. Like I said, I don't think Rhyan's career is over by any means. I still think they might have something in him, but if we're just basing it off 2022, it was not good, and that's why we got the D-. The Packers had 2 selections in the 4th round of this draft, and the 4th round is usually when the Packers do really well in drafts, and that stayed the same this year. In pick 132, they drafted Romeo Doubs, wide receiver out of Nevada. And Doubs came really hot onto the scene in training camp and preseason, and the dude looked like a real deal, even early on in the season, producing where Christian Watson was hurt at the time, kind of stepping up to that plate and becoming a decent target for Aaron Rodgers. But then in that Week 9 game against Detroit, he suffered a high ankle sprain, was out all the way until Week 15 against the Rams, and he was really not the same after that injury. And at that point, Christian Watson already took front and center stage, so Doubs wasn't even getting that many snaps. Doubs did finish with 42 receptions, 425 yards, and 3 touchdowns. But based on the fact that Doubs was a 4th-round rookie wide receiver, going into a wide receiver room with Al Lazard, Randall Cobb, and even Sammy Watkins, you didn't really expect this guy to get many snaps at all, but he did step up to the plate early on and showed great promise. And I still think Doubs will be a really solid number 2 wide receiver in this league, and that's exactly how I project him in this Packers offense in future years. But since he basically didn't play the second half of the season, and obviously the injury isn't his fault, but after he returned from the injury, like I said, he just wasn't the same. So based on that and the good first half of the season, I'm going to give Romeo Doubs a B grade. The next pick in the 4th round for the Green Bay Packers at pick 140 was Zach Tom, offensive lineman out of Wake Forest. And man, I really do think this is a home run pick. I think Zach Tom is going to turn into something really special on this Packers offensive line. And you already saw it his rookie season, the ability to basically play anywhere on the offensive line, even left tackle. For a rookie to come in, play guard spots, play right tackle, and then have to play left tackle in some instances and block for Aaron Rodgers is such a tall task, and he did not falter at all. And the crazy thing is, playing all of these positions, he played them all super, super well. And I think Zach Tom deserves a spot on this offensive line come 2023 season. I think you got to get the 5 best guys out there, and Zach Tom is one of them. And in my eyes, Zach Tom was by far the best rookie offensive lineman last year. If we compare him to all other rookie offensive linemen with at least 20% of the 1,300 snaps here, Zach Tom only allowed 1 sack. If we look at the sacks on all these other rookie linemen, I mean, you got 7 here, 10, 5, 7. A lot of these linemen allowed a lot of sacks and a lot of pressures, whereas Zach Tom allowed minimal of both, only 12 pressures here. And it's just crazy saying that, considering he played so many different positions. As I said, I think Zach Tom's a home run draft selection here. The Packers always seem to get some stud offensive lineman in the 4th round of the draft, and I think that's the case here. So based on his 2022 season and how I project him in the future, Zach Tom is the only player on this list getting an A+. I'm super excited for his future on the Green Bay Packers offensive line. The next pick for the Green Bay Packers draft was in round 5, pick 179, and they selected edge Kingsley Enagbare from South Carolina. This guy I had a 2nd or 3rd round draft grade on, so when he kept falling and falling, and I was like, oh, I hope the Packers pick this guy. When they ran that card up for round 5, and I heard that name called, I was just so excited. And Kingsley Enagbare didn't fail to impress me. It took a while for him to start really seeing snaps on defense, and a lot of that was based off of, Rashawn Gary tearing his ACL, and then other players, Tipa Nalii was on IR, John Garvin didn't do well per usual. But when Enagbare got on the field, he definitely showed great promise. If we sort all rookie edge defenders by total pressures, everyone above Enagbare was a 1st round pick, except for Ebiketie, who was a 2nd round pick. That's pretty crazy because Enagbare was a 5th round pick with 25 total pressures. Now, obviously at the top here, we have Karlaftis with 49 pressures and Aiden Hutchinson, who had a really good year with 53 pressures, but both were 1st round draft selections. So going into it, you kind of expected these guys to play a ton of snaps, get some pressures, get some sacks. And Enagbare, you didn't really expect him to play a ton this year, but when he was on the field and he played more than I expected, like I said, he produced 25 total pressures, 3 sacks, 5 hits, 21 total tackles with 4 missed. Considering the round you got him in, the 5th round, and what he produced year 1, I think the future for this guy is really bright. Also, considering the Packers' edge depth isn't that great, I do think they'll draft a guy or sign a guy to add to that edge room with Rashawn Gary's return being unknown when that's going to be. But based off of Kingsley Enagbare's 2022 season and his projection moving forward, I'm going to give him an A grade. The Green Bay Packers had 4 7-round selections in the 2022 draft, the first of which at pick 228, they selected Tariq Carpenter, safety out of Georgia Tech. And this was definitely a special team selection. When they drafted him, I really saw him as that linebacker/safety hybrid, whereas I kind of wanted the Packers to address safety earlier in the draft with a true safety. And now we're kind of seeing the downfall of that. Rudy Ford, Adrian Amos, both impending free agents. The Packers are extremely thin at safety. Darnell Savage is on the 5th-year option, but didn't have a good year at all last year and probably shouldn't be a starter moving forward. So when I saw this pick, I wasn't too enthused about it, but at the same time, I understood them trying to rebuild the special teams, and that did happen. They had a much better special teams unit in 2022. But honestly, it wasn't because of Tariq Carpenter. He definitely made a few plays on special teams, but in terms of overall and PFF grade here, he was a 47th graded PFF player on the Packers. And I'm not even talking about all rookies in the NFL. That's just on the Packers with a 54.7 grade. So although I do think he'll get better and he will become a pretty decent special teamer on this team, I just don't really see him being a player that's going to play much defense. He didn't play a single defensive snap in 2022 when the Packers had some safety concerns, then went out and signed someone like Rudy Ford who played really well. So because of that, I'm going to give Tariq Carpenter a D+ grade for 2022. He did play a lot of special team snaps. He did make some plays on there, but he wasn't really a great special teamer by any means, and he was just a 7th-round pick. Like I said, I'm not saying he's not going to be a good special teams player in the future, but just based on 2022, he's going to get a D+. The next 2 picks in the 7th round, I'm going to combine these two. Jonathan Ford, defensive lineman out of Miami at pick 234, and Quay Walker, tackle out of Penn State at pick 249. Now I'm combining both of these guys because neither of them played any snaps on offense or defense. I think Quay Walker played a few on special teams, but I think it was just a field goal block unit. So for these two, I'm not going to give them a grade. They really didn't play at all, and they're 7th-round draft selections, which it kind of makes sense. You don't expect every single draft pick to play on offense or defense, especially considering they're 7th-round guys. Now, if either of these guys were like 3rd, 4th, or 5th rounders, they would get a negative grade just for not playing at all, like Rhyan. But since they're 7th rounders, they're going to have an incomplete grade. So for the last pick in round 7, pick 258, the Packers selected another wide receiver, their 3rd in the draft, Samori Toure out of Nebraska. And if you guys have been a part of this channel, you'll know I loved this pick. And then going back, watching his film at Nebraska and even Montana, the one thing I noticed about him is he is an excellent route runner, and everything he does by the book for a wide receiver, and I was really surprised that this guy fell to the 7th round. And honestly, for a 7th rounder, when you compare it to the other 3 7th rounders the Packers drafted, he showed a lot of promise for being a 7th rounder. Obviously, the wide receiver room was probably one of the weakest position groups on the Green Bay Packers, and that's why Samori Toure ended up getting some snaps. But when he was on the field, I kept saying, I want to see more of Samori Toure. Like, why are we giving more snaps to a guy like Sammy Watkins early in the year when you have someone like him who can keep building off of this and probably become a decent receiver? Now, he did only end with 5 receptions, 82 yards, and 1 touchdown. But for a 7th-round wide receiver, in a crowded room but not great room, that's actually pretty impressive. And like I said, every time he was on the field, he did impress me. Toure took 63.2% of his snaps out of the slot, and the Packers are without a slot receiver right now. Randall Cobb is an impending free agent. Now, I do believe they're going to draft a guy early in this draft, maybe a pure slot receiver, someone like Jalen Hyatt if they decide to go that route, but I still have high hopes for Samori Toure. So even though he only had 82 yards and 5 receptions, the fact that he was a 7th-round pick and even did that much is why I'm giving Samori Toure a B- grade, because I do believe this guy has a place in this offense in the future. Will it be next year? I'm not sure, but I do believe he can be a really good receiver in the slot, even out wide in multiple different ways. What I've seen from him on tape is just not usual for a 7th-round wide receiver. All right, so that does it for all my grades for the Green Bay Packers 2022 draft class. As I said, these are just grades based off of the 2022 season and kind of how I project them going into the future. A lot of this can change, and it will change. So none of these grades mean like, oh, this guy's definitely not going to work out. You know, giving Rhyan a D grade doesn't mean he's not going to work out. And giving Zach Tom an A+ grade doesn't mean he's 100% going to be a star in the league. It's just kind of basing off of what I see happening and what happened in 2022. But I want to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Do you agree with these grades or do you disagree? Let me know which one in the comments below. But I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching, and as always, go Pack Go.